All right, Anish.
Anish.
So this government came to power declaring that it would be the government to fix housing, and yet it has taken Minister O'Brien more than a year to present his plan. For 14 long months, this coalition government has dithered and it has delayed. It's brought no sense of urgency, no sense of purpose, and no vision for solving a crisis that has defined life in Ireland for an entire generation. Home ownership remains beyond their reach, rip-off rents keep going up, and families in desperate need of social housing are left abandoned. And today the government finally publishes its plan. And the big question is this: has it been worth the long wait? Has the government used the 14 months to draft a plan that will actually fix housing? Does it contain the right initiatives to end this crisis and help build a better future? And sadly, the answer to all of these questions is no. It won't ensure that houses are affordable for ordinary workers. It won't tackle extortionate rents. It won't end the scandalous housing waiting lists. This plan is not the solution or the change that our people want or need. In fact, it's a blueprint for more of the same failed policies that created this crisis in the first place, the same broken Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael policies that put the interests of wealthy developers, of international investment funds and big landlords ahead of the housing needs of ordinary families and workers. What a lack of ambition. What a wasted opportunity. The undeniable reality is that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael cannot be trusted to fix housing. And the overwhelming truth is that with the political resolve and with the right policies, the housing crisis can be fixed. Time and again, Sinn Féin and Owen O'Brien have shown how this can be done. Simply put, we need the largest affordable and public housing programme in the history of the state. And we need that programme not simply on paper, but we need that programme delivered. It's time to make housing affordable and accessible again for everyone. And what today demonstrates quite clearly is that this will never happen with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael leading government. Tá rialtas nua uan a chuireann gná daoine chun tosaí. Tá rialtas uan faoi stúir Sinn Féin a rocky in leis na ngearcéim seo. Tá gníomh uan, ní féidir linn fanacht níos faide. We need a new government that puts ordinary people first. A Sinn Féin-led government that will tackle the housing crisis head on, not just with words, but with actions. And we need Owen O'Brien as our housing minister. Owen?
Thanks very much, Mary Lou, and thanks for folks for attending. I have to say I had a terrible sense of deja vu as I was listening to the government press conference. All of the claims about the biggest public house building programme in the history of the state and the largest housing budget were made both by Simon Coveney and then by Owen Murphy during the course of Rebuilding Ireland. And despite all of those promises, 5 years into that plan, by every single indicator, the housing crisis is worse. House prices are higher, rents are higher, social housing output is glacial, and levels of homelessness, notwithstanding the drop during COVID, have started to rise again. And it seems every time a government launches a plan, there's an inverse relationship between the length of the document and the actual concrete actions and details that are included. So what I want to do is just go quickly through some of the claims government has just made in government buildings to give you what I think is actually the real facts behind them. First of all, they're telling us that they're going to deliver 90,000 social homes up to 2030. That's 10,000 less than should have been delivered by Rebuilding Ireland and the National Development Plan. And the reason why, of course, as we know, COVID has reduced the level of social housing supply, but there is nothing in this plan to compensate or catch up for the loss of those 10,000 homes. So we've actually got a net reduction in social housing output, not an increase. I want to welcome the increase or the move to abolish the long-term leasing. But again, there's meant to be 2,000 long-term leases a year, no provision in the social housing output to replace those as we have in our plan with 2,000 extra real social homes. So in fact, we could be looking at a 20% fall in social housing output as per what was promised in the National Development Plan. Also on the homelessness front, they're promising 240 extra housing first tenancies a year. That's only 40 extra tenancies above where the current targets are. That's a tiny number given the thousands of single people trapped in emergency accommodation for long periods of time. And I don't see how they're going to end long-term homelessness with that figure. Probably the most controversial claims of the government are the 36,000 affordable purchase homes over the decade. That is not what is contained in this document. A very large number, if not more than half of that number, are unaffordable, overpriced market homes that will be purchased with the controversial pro-developer shared equity loan scheme. That means that in fact we're looking at possibly 18,000 or so genuinely affordable homes to buy, and very few of those will be delivered in the coming years. The 18,000 cost rentals, while we need to see more, again is far too modest, and it's not going to be until 2025 that we'll even hit 2,000 cost rental units annually, and again, nowhere near enough. And I have to say, the claim that they're going to have an annual capital spend of 4 billion annually is deeply disingenuous. $1 billion of this, of course, is borrowing by the approved housing body sector. They've borrowed $1 billion this year and $1 billion last year, so that's not extra money. And likewise, the borrowing by the LDA isn't necessarily going to come online until after 2025. So if you look at the plan in terms of the actual affordable housing delivery targets, you're seeing only 2,000 affordable homes next year, only 3,500 the following year, and then to settle on 4,400 a year from 2024, 2025 onwards. Compare that to Sinn Féin's plan. We would deliver 20,000 public homes every single year until this crisis is resolved, a minimum of 12,000 social homes annually, and a minimum of 8,000 affordable rental and purchase homes annually. Two final points. On renters, this plan is completely silent. Nothing to stop the rising cost of rent. The most recent consumer price index shows rents rising by, or inflation rising by 2.2%, which means rents can now rise by 2.2%. That is not acceptable. We need a 3-year ban on rent increases. Nothing to bring down the cost of rent, in contrast to Sinn Féin's proposal for a refundable tax credit for all renters to put a month's rent back in their pocket. And the Minister's claim that he's going to introduce tenancies of indefinite duration is not true. Because to do that, he would have to remove sale of property and use by landlord or landlord's family as grounds for issuing a notice to quit. And that is not in the plan. Of course, given that it's Darragh O'Brien, with his instinctive desire to support developers and investors, we see plenty for them. We see a shared equity loan scheme that almost everybody, bar the Minister and his party, believe is a good thing. It will inflate house prices, saddle working families with debt, and not tackle affordability. And we're also hearing that what little extra capital spend is to be in the budget, 500 million euros, will again be a gift to developer, an infrastructural grant, rather than delivering genuine affordable homes. There are two things that are clear from what we've heard at the press conference. This plan is no different to the last. It is not going to tackle the housing crisis. If you're sitting at home today as a struggling renter, or somebody desperate to buy your own home, or languishing on a local authority housing waiting list, what Darragh O'Brien, Micheál Martin, Leo Varadkar and Eamon Ryan have said is next year, the year after, and the year after, at best things will stay the same, and at worst things will get even harder for you. There's clearly been a battle between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael since the postponed launch of this plan in July, and all I can conclude is Fine Gael have won that battle hands down. This is Rebuilding Ireland Mark II, and unfortunately it's not going to solve the problems created by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael.
Owen, would you not concede that the 4 billion figure in the context of country that collects about roughly 60 billion in tax every year. It's actually quite substantial.
Well, first of all, it's not 4 billion of exchequer revenue. Let's be very, very clear about that. The capital spend that they're proposing for voted expenditure is only 2.5 billion. So that will be, and that's on average over the next 5 years. We don't know what next year is going to be, but clearly it's not going to be the doubling of direct capital investment recommended by ourselves or the ESRI. The 1 billion figure of approved housing body borrowing, that's what they borrowed this year. That's what they borrowed last year. That's not extra on top of what's already been done. And the LDA's capitalisation of borrowing, it's going to be 4 or 5 years before that starts filtering into the system. So if the question is, what is the actual level of increased capital investment by government next year, it's a few hundred million extra, not the doubling of capital investment that we've called for at the ESRI or others. That's why, for example, the only way you deliver 20,000 genuinely social affordable homes, as we've called for, or 18,000 as the ESRI have called for, is by doubling that capital investment. The government's targets for next year, 9,000 social, 2,000 affordable, that's 11,000, well short of the 20,000 that's needed.
So, Owen, how much exactly extra do the government is committed in terms of capital investment, do you estimate?
Well, no, what they've said is it's in the plan, right? Yeah. They're saying that they're going to spend in direct capital investment 2.5 billion euros year on year from now to 2025. It's not going to be 2.5 billion next year. We presume it'll be incrementally increased, but it's nowhere close to what's required.
Just on there was the referendum on a right to housing, and the plan talks about a commission that will consider it. Obviously that was committed to the programme for government. Are you surprised there was no set date for any referendum?
No, Fine Gael are absolutely opposed to a referendum to enshrine the right to housing in the Constitution. While the Fianna Fáil position has changed, they now say they support it. I don't believe them. And by putting it into a commission, you're kicking it down the road for a year or for 2 years. The Commission on Housing was never meant to look at these issues. It was meant to look at the long-term plan for a housing system. Yet apparently the government has now published that plan and the Commission hasn't even been appointed and started its work, which really begs the question, what's the point of the Commission in the first place? I do not believe this government is serious about that referendum. If they were, they would have committed to a date in 2022 in this plan, and that's very clearly absent.
Mary, there was some coverage this week in relation to the post-rental scheme. I think in your constituency, 1,600 homes that you objected to. I suppose that's a lot of people reading that. Why are Sinn Féin objecting to homes being built for people when there is a housing crisis and people need homes?
People desperately need homes, and we need to ensure that when a site such as that at Clonliffe is developed, a very fine and well-positioned site, that it's done correctly. The build to let schemes, of course, were illegal until 2018, as you know. Owen Murphy gave these schemes the green light, and what they mean in effect is that if you are renting an apartment in one of these schemes, they will be built to a lesser standard than apartments that are built for purchase. Lesser in respect of things like storage capacity, light, and crucially in respect of this scheme in Drumcondra in terms of size and space. So some 70% of the units in this proposed developments are 1 bedroom. Half of those are studio apartments. So just to give you a sense of it, the studio accommodation is the equivalent of 3 car parking spaces. 3 car parking spaces. And I have to say to you that I think it is a matter of disgrace that there would be even a proposal to construct accommodation for a single person or otherwise that consists of room of the equivalence of 3 car parking spaces, for which the renter will pay through the nose. For me, this proposal is just all of the evidence, if you require further evidence, of how badly wrong housing policy has gone. And not surprisingly, the proposal has met with very deep and widespread criticism right across the communities that I represent and beyond. And it's not because we don't. I understand as well and better than anyone how badly we need accommodation in the area. But developing this site in this way is simply wrong.
For the general public looking in, they think like politicians objecting to housing developments and the
No.
housing crisis, be it Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, whoever. That's a bad idea.
No.
Okay.
Anybody looking at anyone who proposes to another citizen that they should pay through the nose to live in an apartment that is substandard and the size of 3 parking spaces, I would just suggest to you that people understand very well that no politicians should stand over that. And I want to say something else. Sinn Féin in government will make developments like that illegal again. You should not have a green light to build to substandard, lesser standards, and then to have people in hock and in desperate and paying through the nose for that substandard accommodation. Full stop.
Can I just ask you as well in relation to another issue? Minister Simon Coveney has issued a letter to the Foreign Affairs Committee today, attempting to clarify his testimony on Tuesday. What's your reaction to that letter? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, I think it's absolutely essential that Simon Coveney goes back before the committee and sets out a full and frank account of everything that has happened. It's very clear that he was less than forthcoming, and in fact he was misleading in the testimony that he gave to the committee. So he needs to correct that. I think we need now a full and honest account of how all of this happened, how this makey-up job was landed on for Catherine Zappone, what was the nature of the contact and the lobbying between herself and Simon Coveney and the Taoiseach, what was the conversation between the Taoiseach and his department, how was it decided that an envoy position was necessary, that it was this specific envoy, and how was it that nobody else beyond Catherine Zappone featured. I think we also need a full explanation in respect of these texts and the deleting of these texts. The Minister obviously will have to set out his stall in respect of the hacking of his phone. I think we need clarity on all of these matters. But above all else here, what we need is just an acceptance, however they struggle with this amongst Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael ministers in particular, that the days of stroke politics and backslapping and looking after your pals, whether it's leaking them documents or creating jobs for them, that's not acceptable. That day is over. When people spoke in the last general election for change, they want to change in housing for sure and other policy areas, but very fundamentally people want politics and government to look and feel different, and an end to this shockingly entitled politics that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael exemplify time and again.
Do you think keep going with Taoiseach?
I think he firstly needs to come and give a full account of himself. I think this government should go. I think they should all resign. You won't be shocked to hear me saying this, but I also need to say Simon Coveney is not in this on his own. This is just the latest episode of the way in which this government conducts itself, whether it's appointments to the Supreme Court bench or the handling of confidential cabinet documents and contracts. Time and time again, this government demonstrate that they believe that they are entitled, that they can behave as they choose, and crucially that they shouldn't be held to account.
So no confidence motion in Simon Coveney.
Well, we want him back before the committee first. We want answers, and we want the full unvarnished facts placed on the table. That's the first thing that we need to achieve. We had written to the committee, as you know, and Simon Coveney has now confirmed that he will appear before the committee, and when he appears before the committee, he needs to come in and give full, frank and and complete answers to all of the questions.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks a million, guys.
Cheers, everyone.